Here we are, July Innovate, July 15th. We're very excited. Timothy's not able to join us today, so I am your host once again, Erin Morrow from the ASU Technology Office. Keep saying excited, so I'm going to stop doing that. We are excited to have Dr. Jeffrey Kaplan be our speaker today. We're very much looking forward to it. We had some notes on it. I'm really not sure what else to say other than let's all be glad that he took time out of his day to hang out with us, that he is the founding partner of LIFTinnovate and has some amazing work to discuss with us. Jeffrey?
Well, thank you very much, Erin. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. And we're actually coming to you live from our production studios in Cedar Falls, Iowa. So this is a great treat for us to be able to speak to you and to share with you some of our research that's developing right now. It's the first time we've ever had a chance to share the research in this order and in this way. Obviously, the environment being what it's been this last year, both nationally and in terms of our health environment, things are changing and we're trying to learn how to adjust with those changes as well. So being in this environment, being virtual with you, being able to share this information with you is a first for us. Additionally, as you'll see, we've got a long history in developing intellectual property and nationwide best-selling books that really are about the power of people and the power of performance within organizations. And typically what we'll do is we'll produce the book, and then from there we take it out and start sharing it around the country with major organizations so they can use the information and better apply it to make their organizations run that much better. But we're sort of changing that. We're sort of scratching the record, doing it a little differently. Because we have the information now, and we know our publication date is in early 2021, we want to share the information with you now and get some feedback from it to see what's most useful to you, to see what you want to have explained more so that you can make it more practical and tactical and usable in your job every day. So we're going to go ahead and start doing events just like this, introducing the content ahead of the books. And we'll be able to get your feedback in environments like this by asking you to respond to the various points of content in one of two ways. If you take your mouse and you just bring it to the bottom of your screen, you're going to see that a number of options will light up, and one of those is the reaction button. If you click on the reaction button, you'll have two choices. You'll be able to do a thumbs up, which is just basically a confirmation. So if you hear something I say and you say, yeah, that really jives with my experience, then go ahead and give us a thumbs up. If you go ahead and do the second option, which is a clap, that means that you absolutely agree with that that is like a preference. As an example, let's go ahead and try it right now. I was thinking about like what I would ask, and I remember I'm originally from Los Angeles, moved out here to the Midwest. The thing that I miss the most is In-N-Out Burger. And I know you guys have In-N-Out in the area there in Phoenix, Arizona. And I'm just wondering if you've ever had In-N-Out Burger, go ahead and find that reaction key and go ahead and do one of those thumbs up. Give us a confirmation and let's see if that works for everybody. And then the second thing is, after you've done that, let's go ahead and do that same reaction button. And this time, let's do a clap if you like In-N-Out Burgers. It's one thing to have had them. It's another thing to be part of the In-N-Out Burger Nation. And so that'll be how we do that. So we're not going to queue you up as we go forward. We're going to go ahead and have this discussion. We're going to share some content with you. But please feel free that if you hear something that really resonates with your personal experience, give us that thumbs up. If you hear something that you agree with, that that's maybe a new insight for you, that you want to show your support for, go ahead and give a clap. We're recording this, and it'll allow us to have some of the interaction that we'd be able to have if we were in person, only being able to do that virtually. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm really excited today to share with you a concept that we'll be introducing in our new book series. It's the New Leadership Challenge, and the New Leadership Challenge will have 5 volumes, each covering a specific area of business that has been fundamentally changed in environment and experience and the way we use and aggregate information and collect information. All those things have changed, and each of the volumes will cover one of those areas. What we'll be talking about today is one of those volumes called The Great Value Migration. The great value migration is all about the fact that everything that we used to consider of value in transactions, in business, has fundamentally gone through a change. And nowhere is that change more apparent and more important than in our IT organizations. So we're going to focus today not only on the great value migration, but specifically on 5 ways IT has forever changed and will change again in your lifetime. This is news you can use. This is information you can use to basically advance your career and get you that sort of leg up, that extra insight that maybe other people in your organization won't have. But first, let's go ahead and do a little bit of review to show you some of the work we've done leading up to this. All of the work that we're going to be sharing with you today wasn't just derived in the last few months or the last few years. It basically started over 10 years ago when I worked with a gentleman named Keith Ferrazzi, and we created the book in the training series called Never Eat Alone. It was a New York Times bestseller, and what we did is we examined what the top 1/10 of 1%, the top 1/10 of 1% of wage earners did differently. What did they do differently than everybody else? And our findings were pretty amazing. We found that the formula to just amazing success, top of the game success, was pretty simple. The people that were most successful knew what they wanted. They were willing to share it with others in a way that was consumable. And then instead of writing a to-do list, like what am I going to go out and do to achieve this thing that I want to create, they did something different. What they did is they asked a better question. Instead of what do I need to do to be successful, they asked the question, who do I need to create a relationship with to help accelerate my success, to create mutual support, mutual success with other people. Relationships were absolutely the critical factor in the most successful people in the country, in the world. And then we went on a few years later to write the book, Who's Got Your Back? And in Who's Got Your Back, we examined what the best teams in the world did. And when all else is equal, when every team, every factor is equaled out, the one thing that separates great teams from the also-rans, that one thing is social bonds. If you care about the people on your team, if you care about the people that you work with, you're going to be more successful than an environment that doesn't acknowledge that humanity. And so that was the background of the content that we created. 10 years later, we came out with Never Eat Alone, the 10th anniversary expanded edition, and together those represented 3 New York Times bestsellers. As a matter of fact, Who's Got Your Back is one of only 6 business books in history to go #1 overall on the New York Times bestseller list. Not something business books normally do. They normally have a #1 in that category, but that book took on, you know, Harry Potter and 50 Shades of Grey and whatever else was out at the time, and we were able to get that #1 spot, which is very unique for a business book. Then if we move on to the Tell to Win, I had an opportunity to structure a book and a concept around the art of storytelling with the producer, Peter Guber, who was responsible for movies that you may recognize. Batman, Gorillas in the Mist, Rain Man, to name just a few. And he was an amazing gentleman to work with who told the importance of story selling, not only to have a great idea, but to be able to contextualize it and convey the story so that if you want a promotion, if you want a project to be picked up, if you want to open your own business or drive something great to fulfill your own dream, the key is being able to structure that in a story so that you can get other people to support you. The 5th slot here is another book called Pathways to Success. And there we work to try to figure out how can we rapidly accelerate the career development of undergraduates. And we started this program with 8 people in Pasadena, California. And by the end of the following summer, we had actually brought the program to Texas Stadium, and 56,000 students had been through the program. And then most recently, we did Everybody Sells, which was a book that examines the fact that if you're going to be successful at anything that you do, you're going to need to learn the fundamentals of sales. Whether you're in IT, you're a sales professional, or some other function within an organization, it's absolutely critical that you have those sales skills. And all of those lead up to the book that's in the center of this graphic, The New Leadership Challenge, which is the 5-volume set that's coming out in just a few months. And Beyond that, I just want to make sure that I've shared with you the fact that when we talk about this content, we've really got a deep experience in sharing the content around the world. For the last set of books, we did over 1,300 workshops for 230,000 participants, 900 organizations totally, and that was in 26 countries. And along the way, we were able to collect 2,400 interviews from executives in every walk of life, every industry, every size organization, and basically every experiential level that you can imagine. So what we're about to share with you is not Jeff's opinion. It's not LIFTinnovate's opinion, the organization that I'm a part of. It is really a reflection of what we see and hear in the marketplace and what we know to be the trends that are going to be most impactful to the IT industry and to IT professionals specifically. So let's go ahead and get started. Our story starts in 1970 when Alvin Toffler published the book Future Shock. It was an amazing book. It's one of the books they call a seminal book because it literally changed everything. And its topic was exactly that. Change. Now, I was too young to have read it when it came out in 1970. I read it a little later on. My first reading was in 1983, and it is literally the reason I do what I do today. Now, we were cool back in 1983. We had John Travolta. We had, we had the Betamax. I mean, things were going on technologically. We were on top of it. But what Alvin Toffler told us is, for all the change that we were experiencing, for all the cool that we thought we were, there is a bigger, more fundamental change coming just around the corner. And this is how he explained it. He said, if you think about the human species as the species that reflects who we are, like somebody we'd recognize on the street, right? That wasn't so evolved that we wouldn't recognize them as somebody that we'd meet every day. There's only been about 50,000 years of human history, which is kind of surprising when you think about it. But that's how long we've got recorded history for our species as a species. And then Toffler did something very unique. He said, if you think about how long a generation was here and made that generation so it wasn't overlapping, like how long would a generation last? What was the average time someone lived on this planet? And then you lined up those generations one by one, how many would we have? Let me explain, because that may not be clear to you. We take this 50,000 years, and then we say the average lifetime, average lifespan that somebody's been on this planet is 62 years, 62 years. And then we go ahead and we do some simple math. 62-year lifespan, 50,000 years of existence. What comes out on top gives us a different way to examine where we've been and where we're going. And what that number is 800. May seem simple, but look what Toffler did with this. He said 62-year lifespan, 50,000 years of existence equals 800 lifetimes. He put those 800 lifetimes onto a timeline, and then he started to examine when the most critical things happened to our species along that continuum. And the amazing thing was, the first 650 years of our existence, we spent in caves. And more importantly, we did not have the ability to communicate effectively from one generation to a next. So in effect, every generation had to start all over again, relearning every single thing that the prior generation had learned. Not very effective, not very productive, right? And it's amazing when you look at that long timeline, how much of that was spent just fundamentally learning how to communicate from generation to generation. And then the second thing that he put out there is generational communication. We finally got it. We finally figured out how to put symbols on caves and figure out how to communicate with one another through storytelling. But that's only happened in the last 70 generations. So we've been on the planet for 800 generations. Only in the last 70 have we had a method to communicate from one generation to another. It's only been in the last 6 generations, and I really want to slow down because I know I'm excited and I'm going really fast here, but I don't want this particular stat to fly by you. I want you to really let this sink in. It's only been in the last 6 generations that the average person has seen the written word. Not that they know how to read. It's only been the last 6 generations that someone got to see the written word. The average person got to see it. When you think about what you consider your reality and think about that, it really is astounding. It was only in the last 4 generations that we had one succinct single method of timekeeping. Only in the last 2 generations have we had the use of the electric motor. And finally, in our own generation, maybe not yours, you may not be old enough to say this, but going back to the 1950s and 60s, the United States became the first world power to use less than 50% of its population to make its nation's food. And what does that mean? It created a brand new thing called free time, leisure time, the ability to consume, and that changed everything. Why is this so important? Why is this something that's going to be the basis of a book some 50 years later? Because of this fundamental fact that he proved in that book. And that is, you can say that as much has happened since you were born as has happened in all human history before you. That's how fast things are going. Right? When we talk about, change is coming, we have grown up in an age of change where we can't even appreciate what the reality of life was like before us because change is so constant. So it's really important for you as you start to think about your career and what's going to happen in your career over the next 10, 15, 20 years of what changes are coming, how they're going to impact you, and yet how could you potentially leverage them for your own advantage. That was the brilliance of Toffler. As much has happened since you were born as has happened in all pre-recorded history before you. So the question we're going to ask today, what's changed in a single lifetime? What's changed in your lifetime that makes today fundamentally different than the generation just before you? Let's take a look. We're going to look at 5 fundamental changes to the IT world and your career. And it's really important for you to know because these changes are going to affect the rest of your career, and there's even more change to come. These 5 value migrations that are happening in your lifetime, number 1 is data versus meaning. We'll examine how we started to have our love affair with data and how that love affair is shifting from the collecting and aggregation of data into the need to mold that data into something more. We'll also talk about a fundamental change in our transactional approach from ownership into a consumption economy. That's going to change and has already begun to change everything. We'll also talk as IT professionals how our old approach of IT mandates you will use because we have is fundamentally out the door, and we need to start thinking about a different approach. We need to go from mandate to adoption. I'll also talk to you about why, we'll explore why it's so important to stop thinking about being IT management and start thinking about IT leadership. And then we'll finally wrap all of this up with really what we call the new leadership challenge, which is the basis for all the books. And that is the idea, how do we go from vision? How do we go from great strategic ideas into value, into action, into measurable results? And it's a big agenda, but that's what we're going to try to get to during our time together. So let's go ahead and get started with data versus meaning. Really, when you think about it, back in 1990, Time magazine announced the arrival of this new thing called the internet. It was amazing. We now knew that it was possible for data to move, right? Before, data was on a piece of paper, it was in a book, something like that, right? But now, Time magazine announced that there was this new era coming called the internet. And with that era, we had the ability to move data from one place to another. So let's take a look at what the internet has really done for us and how it's changed our environment since that first announcement. When they announced the internet and Internet 1.0, Web 1.0, we were really talking about the opportunity via connections between organizations. We had connected organizations, and it was largely used for academia. It was an ability for academic organizations to share information and to speed along research in various topics. And that's what the glut was. It was exciting, it was new, but we haven't even begun to crack the potential of what the web could mean. We got a better feel for that by 1995, right around the time the book whose namesake, our new book will follow, the book Value Migration came out, in which we were introduced to the concept of value chains. And value chains were the concept that instead of thinking about one transaction, instead of thinking about how much can I sell this for, how much profit can I make in one transaction, we started thinking about the fact that we could create a little bit of value along a chain, and you get that chain like a set of dominoes going so that you get that first bit of value, that second bit of value, and before you know it, the accretive or aggregated value was much greater than any single transaction, and it's predictable. That was very exciting. So by the time we got to Web 2.0, we started to look at how do we connect people. This is when Facebook and other social media came onto the scene. But the value of those networks was not in the technology. It was not in the platform. It was in the content that was being generated by the customer. When have we ever had a business deal where the actual thing we're selling is being created by the customer themselves? This is a big change. It's a big change for virtually every industry and every function and profession that serve organizations. Then we got to the point where we started to connect things, right? And this might be an example. Many of you may have a garage door opener. I know we just got a new garage door opener, and we can actually open it and close it with our phone, right? So we connected the phone to the remote mechanism so that we can open the garage with our mobile device. That's the age of connected things, and that's where we're at today. But all three of these, Web 1.0, Web 2.0, Web 3.0, have one thing in common. They were all about generating and then delivering value, delivering data in a new way, whether that data is an inference signal to open up my garage door, or it's somebody doing a post about how great the baseball game was yesterday, right? All of those things were about generating value. We're now about to go into an entirely new phase of the web, and it's important that you know about it. In 2017, The Economist came out and declared something that was an amazing and monumental statement, that as of that date, the world's most valuable resource was no longer oil, right? That had been the state of the state since World War II. Oil ran the world, right? It ran our combustion engines. It was the most valuable asset on the planet, but no more. Now it was data. And it's really interesting that data replaced oil, because it's just such a great metaphor when you think about what the next step in the web is, because that data is sort of like, crude oil, right? You need gas for your car, but it has to go through a process to go from crude oil into your engine where you can use it, right? It has to be refined. It has to be distributed, right? And that's absolutely critical for us to think about data. Same thing has got to happen with that. In this new phase, it's not going to be enough to aggregate it and offer it up. Like if somebody came and said, oh, I got a great deal on crude oil, I put a barrel of crude in your driveway. Right? You couldn't use that. It isn't refined, wasn't distributed. You have no way to get it into your car and use it. So as we start to look at Web 4.0, that's where we're starting to refine the data. That's where we're starting to find new ways to use it. That's where we're starting to do things we could never imagine before. And let me give you an example, a really simple example of Web 4.0, which is all about connected intelligence. Web 4.0 is about Web 3.0 rather, would have been about me being able to control my sprinkler system with my phone. Be able to go on my phone and say, oh, sprinkler system start, right? That's not really sophisticated. It's just a re-aggregation of data. Web 4.0 is being able to have sensors in that sprinkler system that says, oh, this corner of the lawn is really dry and is starting to brown up. We're going to turn on the sprinklers for a period of time and green that up. It's going to have ambient intelligence that will begin to help us run our lives and to do more and more decision making. This is important to you in IT because right now, these same ambient intelligences are coming online to help you make better decisions in what you do every day. The key is to figure out what decisions you still want to make and which you want to release to these ambient intelligences. And we better decide too, because right on its heels, between now and 2050, right? So if you've got young kids at home, these kids will see this, is Web 5.0. And Web 5.0 is going to change the world in ways I can't even begin to describe to you today. Web 5.0 is all about connected capabilities, right? Connected capabilities, not just decision making, actual capabilities. And we will go from an era where we're experimenting with wearables to an era that will begin to actually see implantables, where we take that technology and we start to implant it in ourselves, that we become part machine and part human, and we become something better. already there is research that's starting to show how implantables can speed along the process of learning. You can imagine that someday we might have a digital divide that isn't, does somebody have access to the internet? Does somebody have a learning support device, an implantable, that makes that faster for them to learn? We would have to segregate classes because, the ones that could learn faster would want a different class than the ones that wouldn't. Or how do we do that? There's going to be all sorts of issues and implications for that we need to be thinking about. And right now, we're right between Web 4.0 and Web 5.0. And so the key point here is that when you look at Web 4.0 and you look at Web 5.0, the primary difference between 1, 2, and 3 and 4 and 5 is instead of aggregating data, we're starting to refine that data into meaning. How do I make decisions? How does this help me in my life? How does it add capabilities? And that is a fundamental shift that has implications for what we do every day. So let's take a look at the second of these changes, and you'll start to see, just like the value, we talked about value chains, you'll start to see how all of this starts to string together into a big picture of what's coming and what you could potentially do about it. Number 2 is all about ownership and consumption. In the days that I grew up in business, it was all about ownership. And today we are very comfortable with having a subscription for something, only buying a part of it, being able to turn it off after a month. And we assume that we better have access to everything right away and all you can eat, right? That's the model now. Wasn't the model 15 years ago or 20 years ago when we had to buy the software, maybe send in a check and then get CDs that you loaded onto your computer, and you had one license for a period of time. Instead, this whole idea offers up some new math. So I'm going to ask you guys, there's a poll question that's going to come up. I'm going to ask you guys a very simple question. What would you rather get? What would you rather get? $10 million, and this is tax-free cash right now, delivered to your home. We have drivers standing by. Or would you rather have 1/2 cent? So go ahead. What would you rather do? Go ahead and make your choice. Would you rather have $10 million cash, tax-free, delivered to your home in cash tonight, or 1/2 cent? All right, we're going to assume that you got a chance to respond to that question, but I am going to ask the question a different way. Let me give you just one more piece of information, see if it changes your answer. Would you rather get $10 million or 1/2 cent of every Amazon transaction forever? Would that change your answer? That's going to be your second poll question. What would you rather get? $10 million tax-free cash delivered to your home tonight, or would you rather have 1/2 cent of every Amazon transaction forever? And obviously, I would think that when you start to consider the implications of the number of transactions, you'd start to see that, yeah, I'd much rather, yeah, there's 100%. So I think you agree that 1/2 cents starting to sound pretty good, okay? Absolutely. Let's translate that thing that may not seem practical and tactical to you. Let's change that to the very question OEMs and other IT manufacturers and providers had to answer just a few years ago. Their question was, and you can answer this as well for a poll question, would you rather get $700 for a one-time sale now, or would you rather get 24 bucks? Now, without any additional information, and the question's up on your screen right now, I'm guessing that you're probably going to say the $700. Or you could say, I've heard this from Jeff before. It's a trick question. I'm going to go with the 24. Either way, I think you're starting to catch on, because there is one more component of that, and that is a month forever. Would you rather get $700 or $24 a month forever? And virtually every hardware and software manufacturer in the business has chosen the subscription model because it is so much more lucrative, so much more value oriented, and is also much easier from a cost of goods sold standpoint. So it's interesting to start thinking, we're thinking differently now. We're not thinking about transactions this minute, but that chain of value, a little bit of value over time, aggregated and accretive. Now, if we think about ownership and consumption, we can start to see the patterns now. Then it was ownership oriented. Now it is consumption oriented. Then we own the software. We owned the hardware and the infrastructure, and that also meant that we owned the unique problem. We couldn't let others in. So if we had an IT seller, they really, we could push them off to procurement. They didn't need to talk to us because nobody understood the unique IT infrastructure we had. It's on premise, we got our data center, we've got our unique setup. You don't know all the implications of our infrastructure. So for the most part, we could do this on our own in the ownership culture. But then came along the idea of consumption. And with the consumption model, you would subscribe to the software. You wouldn't own it. In the consumption model, the hardware and the software and the infrastructure were virtualized. Somebody else provided it for you. And all of a sudden, your unique problems were no longer unique because you have OEMs, providers, software providers, and technology consultancies that had hundreds of thousands or millions of customers that were dealing with the environment that they knew best because it was all virtualized. It wasn't on-premise anymore. So in this consumption environment, as you are an IT professional, we've got to be prepared to engage with and partner with our IT partners at a level we never imagined before. It is an entirely new world. The idea of keeping an IT seller at length, at arm's length with procurement versus engaging them in your conversation and planning is going to be unheard of. We're going to need to do the latter. We're going to need to have more engagement than ever before. And so that is the fundamental difference between ownership and consumption, and it leads us to point number 3 that we want to discuss today, and that is our approach to providing IT to IT user groups. Whether you're an IT leader or you're just a technology user, you should know that the fundamental way in which we train for IT has changed. It's changed from mandate to adoption. I always say I have 4 kids, one of each, because they're all so unique and have their own personalities. But I will tell you that one of the things that I've found with millennials is if you want them to do something and you mandate it, that's a it's virtually a guarantee that they will not do that thing. Right? It's just a nature of the generation. And we need to be thinking differently than mandate. We need to be thinking about this new concept of adoption and a concept that underlies it, which is social organic adoption. It is much more important to today's worker that someone like them, a peer, somebody in the next cubicle, somebody that's an age peer or a rank peer, has the same opinion or believes that in the usefulness of a technology than it is to get a memo that says, hey, this is our new technology. From this step forward, from this point forward, you're expected to use it. That doesn't fly today. Let's take a look at another then and now. In the old days, technology was this thing at work. It didn't exist at home, right? But now technology is everywhere, including work. And I think it's fair to say that today's business professionals are at home with technology, whether they're consuming technology is no longer a unique experience. Holidays, birthdays, or just because, what do? We tear it open, we plug it in, we connect it to the internet, and we start to play, right? The wrapping paper, the packaging, the instructions, boom, those are all trashed. Instead, when we need something, we YouTube how to do what it is we do and what matters to us. And if that's the experience with technology at home, why would we do anything different at work? Those are the questions we have to ask ourselves. How do we make this consumption model of technology, this adoption model of technology, work with the technology that we bring in to our workplace? And that's going to be the challenge that you have, because what we choose to consume, we choose to consume the IT that we consume, and we consume it on our terms. That's the new reality. It is all about consumption and all about adoption through social means, getting peers to encourage other peers to use the technology. Let's put it another way. In the old days, when we wanted somebody to use a technology, we did a lunch and learn, we had a training program, we gave them a manual, and we told them how. We taught, and we thought we were serving. We told them what they needed to do. That was our mandate. And we also made sure that they listened because we had compliance. They would answer if they did not comply. And now today with the adoption model, we think differently. We need to show them where it is they can learn so they can self-serve and self-adopt and develop the peer relationships where they learn how to create workflows and how to use this technology to make them and their jobs and their peers and their teams more successful. We also need to show them how to explore, and ultimately we need to enable them to innovate new ways of working. Because if we're not constantly innovating new ways of working, if we can't think differently tomorrow than today, if we can't work differently tomorrow than we do today, and if we can't engage with more people than ever before to get the job done, we will not be competitive, full stop. Let's go ahead and take a look at number 4. And now we're starting to get into some of the areas that are really important if you're a person that's just starting out in your career, you're a mid-level professional, or you're an executive looking to sharpen your game. It is absolutely critical you know that the age of management is descending and the age of IT leadership is coming full force. And there's a reason why we need more leadership than management. Let's take a look at what they mean. Management versus leadership. Managers deal with complexity through the application of process. We got a problem, we have a process to fix it, and then every so often we go back and we improve that process. That means that every time a manager touches that process, they're creating an incremental piece of value. And the better the process gets, what happens to that value? It gets smaller and smaller and smaller until such time as we can't improve the process anymore. And so the value of management in its nature is one that has diminishing returns over time. Instead, in a world of change, we need something else, right? Managers, when you think about it, if they're examining the process and how it did last time, in order to improve it next time, what are they doing? They're looking backward, right? We call that forensic. They're looking backward to see what happened before to predict the future. How about looking forward and trying to predict the future and anticipating change, which is what leadership is all about. Let's take a look at leadership. The definition of leadership: leaders deal with change through the alignment of resources. And I know I tell people all the time, these are the 2 most important things I've ever read. In all my time, all the research I've done, that managers deal with complexity through the application of process and leaders deal with change through the alignment of resources. Most people give me a blank stare and say, wow, it seems like you've dealt with a lot of interesting things. Why would this be the most important thing that you've ever read? Because what it says to me is it finally delineates what a manager and what a leader is. We're constantly using them interchangeably. There's a book called the Bass and Stodgwell's Handbook of Leadership, 57,000 known definitions of leadership that people have asserted. But I'll tell you what I think leadership is. It's this. Right there. It's that line. And you see on the screen, there's just a single line. What is that line? That is what we call the leadership canvas. The leadership canvas is the horizon line. It's the line that you take your 2 eyes and you look out on that horizon line. You look out to the future and you see change coming from there, change coming from there, change coming from there, change coming from everywhere. And as a leader, you look out onto the horizon, you look beyond that horizon, and you say to yourself, with these changes coming, how can I use the resources that are in my organization now, line them up, so when change gets here, we will be prepared to perform in that environment, right? That is the challenge of a leader. That is about claiming tomorrow's opportunities today. And that's why leadership is so critically important. Once again, managers are forensic. Leaders must be predictive. They must be looking out on that horizon. Which leads us to our final topic tonight, and that is really the idea of vision versus value. And it's the most important concept when you think about our upcoming books of any of them. Because when you think about the new leadership challenge, we define that as simply the single most important challenge of this generation in all of business is going to be, how do I take strategic vision, that great idea, right? Because it's like an opinion. Everybody's got one. How do I take that great idea, push it through the organization, and out the other side, get action and measurable results? How do I take a big concept about a global organization or an internationally known university? How do I take a concept that affects something that large and make it relevant to a frontline worker, to somebody that's doing freshman registration on day one? How do I bring that strategy to life so that everybody in the organization knows how they can contribute to making us successful? And that's absolutely the key. That's the question, the New Leadership Challenge question, which is, how do you go from vision to value? And in doing that, we're going to take a look at then and now again, and we're going to see that then, when we were as an IT organization, we were successful if we lived up to our service level agreements. We were successful if we got a business problem and we architected a great solution, solutions architecture, solved by IT. We were great if we had a great procurement partner that got us those things at a discount, right? It got us the best value we could for money. And we were great if we deployed it correctly and then did break fix. But that's not what matters anymore. I mean, we've got to do that, but a lot of that stuff's outsourced, right? Remember, we're in a subscription basis now. So today, we have to figure out how to drive workflows that matter. We've got to develop user experiences that excite people. So it's not a question of shadow IT. They're going to want to use the tools that you put out there because you've thought about them. You know what their life is like. You know what their day's like. And you've created things that will make them be more successful. The user experience is critical. In order to do that, we need to engage with them more than ever before. Now, you may have picked up on something I said earlier, that when it comes to our IT vendors, we need to engage with them more than ever before. Now you see it again. When it comes to our users, we need to engage with them more than ever before. That's one of the three fundamental answers to this riddle, and that is we need to engage with more people than ever before to be successful. And then we need to figure out how to drive measurable business value. For too long, IT has done its job without having to be called on the carpet for the real business value. And we've been generating it. That's the worst part. We've been successful, but we've never ventured out to say, this is how we can measure what we've done in terms that are critical to the business. Instead, we do uptime and, see how many nines we can put on the right side of the decimal point in terms of uptime. When the thing that really matters is how many widgets did we produce off the line, or how many productive hours were we able to squeeze out because of a new tool. These are things that we now need to be a part of. And once we understand what those metrics and measures are, we as IT, which we've done a dreadful job over my entire career, we need to get a lot better, is we need to tell the IT value story so that other people in the organization get what IT is about. If you don't think that that is the case, we'll give you a stat from some research that we're just about to share with everybody on August 13th. We'll give you a stat in a second that'll prove that. But I just want to bring this home and make sure we're thinking about the same vision here. The IT that I grew up with had strategy, people, and processes as the pillars that ran the organization, on top of a horizontal bar, which was the infrastructure, right? That was IT. And as provided that infrastructure was up and working and we fixed things that broke, we were successful. That was IT, right? But now we've gone to a brand new model. And we still have that same strategy, people, and process, the same things that were there before. But instead of it being along a horizon line, it's instead in a circle, and in the center of that circle is technology organization. Because let me ask you, if you think about any new initiative, any material initiative on campus at ASU or in your own organizations, if you're a guest outside the university tonight, think about any initiative. And what do would you ask yourself, would that involve technology? Of course it would involve technology. So it's our opportunity as IT leaders, instead of just thinking about processes that came before, instead of thinking about the way we did things before, to instead produce a set of metrics and measures that say, this is how we measure business success that we've created in IT, and here's our IT story, and place ourselves firmly in the center of that circle, right? Because if we do, then we're going to be the holders of the three most important things that shield us from these tremendous changes that have already happened in this generation. The three things that can shield us are innovation, collaboration, and engagement. We call that the ICE principle. Innovation. Are we able to think differently tomorrow than we do today? We can if we have technology-enabled help, like technology-enabled help through the IT organization. Can we work differently tomorrow than we do today? We can if we get collaborative software and support through IT. And can we reach out and engage with and work with more people than ever before to create solutions and productivity as quickly as possible? We can, with the help of the IT organization. We know that. But I will tell you, unless we start to think about this, unless we start to position ourselves in our organizations to be the center of this circle, then what we're going to find is what some research that we've just conducted for the 5th year, and unfortunately we keep getting the same types of results, shows us. And let's take a look at that. And we're not doing a poll question here, but the basic thing we went out to research is, what percentage of organizational strategies do you think have technology as a component? Now, if we did do a poll question, the answer would probably be 90, 95, 97, 99, pretty close to every single one, right? So if every strategic initiative, if organizational strategies generally, almost always involve technology, then what do you think the answer to this question is? What percentage of organizational strategies are explicitly assigned to or credited to IT? And this is where we know that we haven't done a good job as a function within an organization. Because according to our research, as part of the case study 2021 that we'll be releasing on August 21st of this year, only 6% of corporate strategies among Fortune 100 companies were assigned to or credited to IT. And yet we're everywhere. We're in every single one of the strategies, but we're just not seen as the value driver, and that's what we need to change. So, does your organization trust IT to deliver strategic value? If not, you've got a framework of 5 fundamental changes that are already occurring right now to help you reorient that thinking in your organization and reposition IT in a new way. Because change is coming, change has been coming, and it's going to continue to come. It's not over. The great value migration continues right now. And if you don't believe me, ask yourself, what was the state of the art? What was the best of the best in IT just a few months ago? What was the best of IT in February 2020? And how has that fundamentally changed today? We are serving a workforce that no longer comes into work. We went from virtual is nice to have to a must-have literally overnight. And IT was there to respond. This is our time to step up and get the acknowledgement and to take the center stage that we've long deserved, get a seat at the table, the strategic table for IT in our organizations. It's a scary time. It's a time of change. But it's also a time for opportunity. And I hope each of you will take what you've learned today to try to create those opportunities in your organizations. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for listening. We'll take a few minutes and open up to see if there's any questions.
Yeah, we have a couple of great questions already. The first one is, how important is it that IT leaders become a part of the corporate strategy conversation in the boardroom?
Could you do the first part though? How what?
How important is it that IT leaders become a part of the corporate strategy conversation in the boardroom?
Well, so we can answer that a couple of ways. Number one, as being somebody from IT, all of us want that, right? And my entire career, the view of IT has been a pendulum. On one side, it's like, no, IT is just a glorified vendor, right? We're just providing a service level agreement and that's it. And then all the way back on the other side where they say, oh no, IT is absolutely central to our strategic success. They are a strategic partner, but it's always been a choice of the business. I don't think it's a choice anymore. If we take the initiative, we can take that seat at the strategic table. And I think it's absolutely imperative, not only because of our desires. I mean, from an ego standpoint, we know the impact IT's made, right? We've been making it for a long time. We want other people to know it. We'd like to have our voice heard. So it's all great from a gratification standpoint. But more importantly for our organizations, if IT doesn't step up to become that center of innovation, collaboration, and engagement, then our companies will just not be as efficient and productive as they could be. And that's our responsibility back to our organizations and our universities. So great question. Thank you for that.
Okay, the next one is from Melissa. What are the characteristics that define a successful IT strategy?
The characteristics that define a successful IT strategy are not only the technical components, which you know better than anyone, right? That they satisfy your infrastructure and the business problems you have, but that the solutions that come out of it engage the user community. One of the things that we always say when we give speeches, and I know this is in a virtual environment, but in any size, whether it's 20 people or when I did Texas Stadium with 14, 15,000 people, is that the smartest person in the room is never the speaker. It's always the people in the audience, because they're living what you're talking about every day. They have the answers. They're living the answers. And the same thing is true with IT. And with IT, that those answers live in the user community. And it's absolutely critical that we engage the users in developing our strategy. It's also, so that's number two. Number three is that we have to measure the impacts of IT, because in the old days, like I say, we turned it on, or we got a good deal, or it was always available. Those things don't work anymore. What has this IT done to drive our performance? And that's really absolutely critical, that we have objective measures that the business can understand. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a meeting in a boardroom where somebody from IT stands up, and it's almost like, it's just like, like those cartoons and stuff when somebody turns into a heel or a steak or something in a cartoon because it symbolizes what they're, how they're feeling or whatever. Well, the IT person stands up and they're like a giant pocket protector, and everybody just phases out because they don't understand what the IT person's talking about, because they're intimidated by something they don't know. We need to make our stuff relatable. We need to give them metrics and measures that they get, in terms of what their job is every day. And then the final thing, the final point of creating a great strategy is to be able to tell that story. Every IT organization has to have a vision to what they're trying to achieve, and they've got to relate that vision to the organization's overall strategy. If they can do that, they will have relevance in every corner of the organization, and they will have a strategy that people will take seriously and will think, hey, this means something to me.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is, what's the impact of the COVID pandemic on IT strategy, and how derailed are we?
Well, I think we're here today. I think that's the answer. We're here right now, and we see it. We've worked with organizations from the LA Department of Water and Power, where we help them really change a culture that was used to building things that lasted 70, 80, 90, 100 years, and instead trying to reorient an entire IT department into a virtual workforce overnight. We've worked with the Portland school systems, where they wanted to not give up on the social impacts and the developmental opportunities that high school presented just because COVID was there. So the IT department took it on themselves to create an initiative to do the first virtual prom, which we were able to host. I mean, these things are happening all around us today, and this is the creativity of IT. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm incredibly optimistic, right? The world hasn't stopped in terms of business, right? We're doing this today, and we're doing it today because creative people in IT knew what the tools were. They deployed those tools, and amazingly, we were very resilient and responded to that change, which is what our generation does. Because keep in mind, that book came out in 1970. We're only 50 years into that first generation of 62 years where everything's changed, and we can see that it's already changed again and again and again. And COVID's just one stop along the way. Together, we could definitely get to the other side of this really effectively through IT's creativity.
Awesome. I have one more written in the chat. It is, will the fact that so many people are working remotely now help enable IT to be seen as more of a strategic partner?
I certainly hope so, because I just feel like this is our time to come of age, right? For so long, we've been like the silent ones that come in and out, and we're just like people who write codes and backslash and semicolon, all the things that they think IT is. Now IT is a real fundamental part of the business. As a matter of fact, for the first time ever, we are exposing IT as the linchpin between operation and not even be able to operate the next day. We actually are doing, I think it's my favorite project we've done in the last year. We're working with the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC, doing their virtual registration. 3,000 students are going through a virtual registration process today while we're talking. This process is going on. And we could have shut that school down, right? If we didn't do well, these students wouldn't have this opportunity. The first opportunity they have to interact with the university they've chosen would have been an absolute nightmare had it not been solved through IT and through collaboration. And instead, we're getting comments back that we may use this in the future, even if we do have the physical option, because it's so much more efficient. It gives so many more options to our students that work, that might not be able to come during normal times. We just have a lot of options, and virtual is, in this respect, potentially even better than physical. Did we ever think that that would happen? I think that most people would say, if we're going to do something virtual, it's going to be at best on par with physical, or it's going to be sort of short of physical. We've got customers with creative IT departments that are saying virtual can be better. And that means that IT is going to be finally recognized as the linchpin to make it all happen.
David, you wrote a wonderful comment. Do you want to just read yours, or would you like me to read it?
Hey there, I'm happy to read it. Can you guys hear me?
Absolutely.
Oh, cool. So I love the commentary around creating value, especially as an IT function, but I think oftentimes leaders know that they need to begin to quantify outside the traditional metrics, but oftentimes struggle to make the rubber meet the road and figuring out the how do I actually quantify. Do you have any guidance for folks that are really trying to understand what are the key metrics that I can drive and how can I gather those metrics in order to build a case or quantify my impact?
What a great question. I mean, it's fantastic. Let's remember those three fundamentals, right? We've got innovation. We got to think differently tomorrow than we do today. Collaboration. We've got to work differently tomorrow than we do today. And engagement. We've got to engage more people than ever before in finding our solutions. The metrics that we're talking about are new. They're new for every single sector, whether you're a corporation, a publicly traded corporation, or you're a public entity like a university. Those metrics don't exist today. So getting out into forums like this, getting engaged, starting to have those conversations, or reach out to us at Lyft, and we'd be more than happy to sponsor a forum that would bring together IT professionals in the universities, and that's, we spend a lot of our time with higher ed. We'd be more than happy to coordinate that discussion so that you can see the kinds of metrics and measures that are being used elsewhere, and together create tomorrow's industry standards. It's a benefit to the function inside each university. If the function is more successful, the university is going to be more successful. And because we are in an industry in higher ed that is not focused on money, but sees student success as the outcome, we're really lucky because people are willing to share ideas in ways that they do not share ideas in for-profit environments. So we'd be happy to facilitate that for you. We'd be happy to get on a call with you one-on-one and just do a brainstorm. But I think they're yet to be made. Great question, and I think that's the next key breakthrough. What are those industry metrics and measures as they relate to IT and the enablement of student success?
That's it for everybody who typed in, but I would love for anyone to open their microphone and just ask a question.
While we're waiting for people to write in, I just want to say I see somebody here that I know he's out on deployment. It's amazing that you called in. Matt Previtz, thank you so much, man, for calling in, and thank you for your service. We greatly appreciate everything you do every day. But are there other questions? Sorry to interrupt.
Nope, that was it at this point.
All right, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you. I hope that as the Great Value Migration marches on, you join the march. And if you want to reach out to us, our information for our organization and my personal information are provided to you. And I'd love to hear from you individually and continue the conversation about the Great Value Migration. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. This is an amazing conversation. I hope everybody had a great time. We love having you here.